Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Birds and the Lees. This is Nathan, and I'm here with Kim. Kim, how are you today?
I'm great.
Awesome. So, we are continuing our story, which we are well into like part 6, I think. And not normally do we. Well, maybe it does take a while to tell this story. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about that, but I feel like it takes quite a while to kind of fill in who we are, and which is why we're doing this. We're doing this so that we can explain to you who we are, and
Yeah.
that'll give you some insight into the things we talk about and the subjects we talk about. And how do you feel it's going so far?
I think it's great.
You think it's great?
Yeah. I think it gives a good background as to where we came from and where we're going.
Yeah, yeah. So we're just getting right into it. You know, we can do a lot of
Yeah.
we just jump right into
There are lots
whatever
of,
this is. So,
Yeah, there are lots of side stories,
Yeah,
but
there
for
are lots
right
of side
now, we're
stories.
building a good base for you guys to understand why we have a passion for what we're talking about.
Yeah. So if you were here last time or you listened to the last one, we had talked about how, these were the early years of our marriage, and Kim was in new home sales. I was working full time at a church in student ministry as a middle school pastor, actually, is what I was doing. And where we kind of left you was a cliffhanger where we said that, seemed like everything was kind of on track, and then kind of everything changed. Well, began to change. At this
Right.
point, not everything is going to change just yet, but it's going to be kind of the beginning of this long road that we're going to go through.
Right.
And the very first thing that happened really had nothing to do specifically with us, but at the time, what we found out is that the church I was at ended up having a moral failure on the part of the senior pastor. And if you've ever experienced that, it's a very, very difficult time.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was hard.
Kim will tell you it is very difficult for a variety of reasons. Obviously, the family that's involved, the family, the individuals who are directly involved into that. But then there's this ripple effect that happens through the entire church, because obviously anyone in that position immediately is biblically disqualified from being in the pastorate at
Yeah.
that point. And, I do believe in reconciliation. I do believe in restoration. But obviously, in that moment, you can't have someone leading with this very visible, gross sin that's going on.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to get into the details of that because that's not our story to tell.
But I think what is our story, and part of that is that we were in a good place
Yeah, we
as
were.
a couple. And had we not been, no matter what the issue had been, that would have been an incredibly hard scenario to navigate.
Well, yeah, because like I said, it affects everyone. So you come home one day and,
Right.
now all of a sudden there's this information that hasn't been shared with the entire church, but you now possess that.
Right.
We've always said that being a pastor's wife is difficult because everybody assumes you know everything that's going on.
Right.
So immediately they're going to pump you for information.
Yes. And we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Some funny stories later.
There are some
on
funny
that.
stories
Yeah.
about that. But it's a difficult time because now it feels like the future's kind of up in the air. What's going to happen to the church? And there's and I have to say the experience overall at first was, while it was a terrible situation, the response of the church was very positive in the sense that there was
Right.
a commitment to care for the family. There was a commitment to care for those in the church.
Right.
There was really a rallying around, because this was a very, I believe, healthy body of believers.
Yeah.
And while we were going through what's essentially a trauma, it's a family trauma, really.
It is. Yeah. I mean, some of our, as far as you in ministry, some of our most engaging kids stepped out because of the fallout of everything that
Yeah, I
happened.
mean, there was some of that, and there's there's all the discussions about direction and where we go and who's going to be the next person, and you enter into all those discussions, and there's a lot of tension, and there's a lot of kind of up and down and questioning, and I think overall we navigated that fairly well. Obviously, at some
Yeah.
point, about a year later, really it was about a year, we bring a new pastor on. And, this is kind of the signifier of where things are going to significantly change for us. Up to this point, we didn't figure anything
Yeah.
was going to be different except the leadership.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a year for us of growing and understanding that what happens at the church that we know about
Yeah.
is often quietly discussed at home behind a closed door.
Yeah, and it has to be. Otherwise, you're gonna be. You have to be able to have that trust with each other to be able to share those things, because you can't. you have this time at church where everybody in your office, where everybody's aware of a situation. You
Right.
can do that, but you can't come home and just sit down and say, you know what, this sucks. I don't know
Yeah.
what to do. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to go home. You can't do that in
Right.
the office. You want to protect
And you can't engage the drama. You
No.
can't, and no matter what church you're in, there's always someone who wants to push that boundary, either
Yeah.
on staff or not on staff. And the reality to have a very earnest, hard conversation about situations and what the outcomes might be, sometimes your only option is at home.
Yeah, sometimes, and obviously you want to be very discreet about that, and we did a lot of that. We did a lot of debriefing and
Yeah.
and thinking and processing, and even after the new hire, there was always that question of hey, is this really where we need to be right now? Is there
Right.
a next step? And I think we were liking where we were, and I do believe I had lots of friends and the people that mentored me and very close relationships at this church. So with those close relationships, you obviously, you don't want to lose those. So we felt like it was a really good place for us at the time.
Yeah.
And but then things kind of, and it's a difficult situation to talk about because obviously we want to protect, and we don't want to sound disparaging of anybody. But things begin to change at the church. Things begin to change. The vision,
And that'll come with new leadership every
every
time
time.
it happens. Mm-hmm.
And there's this decision. This is like one of the hardest decisions you'll ever make. Is the vision different enough, or the direction different enough that it's time for you to step down? Is this God actually telling you, okay, this is time? But does that outweigh the, I don't want to say comfortableness, but the security you have
Right.
with a job and where your family is? Are you willing to say, okay, look, I can put up with this? Or
Because looking for a job in ministry can be hard and tricky.
well, it can be long. I mean,
Yeah.
the sense of we could, and I'd love to do an episode where we talk about the good and the bad of looking for a job in
Yeah.
ministry, because I think there's a ton of it
Yes.
that goes both ways. But there's this moment where you have to make this decision, and I guess it's with any job, but you feel like, can I put up with this enough because it's the best thing for my family, or do I really need to just move on? And I think that's where I
Right.
was. I don't know
Yeah.
if I ever really expressed that I was really in that kind of place because some things were changing, and some people didn't like change, and we had some negative experiences then.
Well, I mean, I also think some of your theology was changing.
Some of ours, I would say a different viewpoint was coming in that wasn't necessarily at the heart and the core of what the
Yeah.
church had been.
Right.
And I was solidifying mine
Mhm.
and understanding more of where I land on a great many things.
Yeah.
And, within the politics and the relationships and the feelings and the expressions, and I'm sharing this with you, you remember those nights. There were long elder meetings and
2 in the morning.
yeah,
Ugh.
1 a.m., 2 a.m. elder meetings. And, there just was this general malaise, or not, maybe just more frustration
Yeah.
around.
Well, I think really at the heart of it, everybody was sad.
Well, there was that. We were mourning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we had been in such a good place in such a growing church. We were mourning, I think, what we had been.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult to recover from things like that. You can, and I believe God's big enough to do that.
Yeah.
But, we started losing people. There was a new church that opened up in town that quickly became huge, and I'm not going to mention who it is, but,
But
they're very well known.
everybody knows them.
Everybody
Yeah.
knows them and knows who the senior pastor is, and they
And-
were beginning to draw people.
And they do great things.
Yeah, and they have great ministry, and to watch people leave over
Mhm.
for things as little as, oh, they have better music. Well, okay,
Right.
hold on.
Mm-hmm.
We've had such a good run as a church. Those are the things that can ultimately kind of tear away at your heart. And, we're trying to do our best. I was fairly new in ministry. I've only been in like 5-6 years. I would consider that very new because
Right.
ultimately it was my first 2 years of being a pastor. I'd gone through the ordination process, and,
Although the average tenure of a pastor is like 3 years. or
well, yeah,
something.
especially
So-
in student ministry,
Mhm.
it's short. But I mean, I had literally been working at this. This was the church I grew up in, so I'd been on staff in some capacity for. Let's see, this was probably 2006, so since 5 years in
Yeah.
one spot, working for someone who'd been there, at the time, like 10 years.
And
And so,
I think even as a churchgoer, somebody can identify with giving your heart and soul to a church
mhm,
for years, and then major change comes, whether it be through who's directly, in charge of your ministry, or who's running the church, or even an admin change
yeah,
sometimes
it's
can
hard.
completely change a ministry and how it serves your family.
And especially if you've been there for a while. Like at one point, I was the third longest tenured youth ministry worker in our town.
Right.
And we have a pretty significantly big
Yeah,
city.
I was going to say that sounds really like if you're from a teeny tiny town
We're
in
not a small
Wisconsin,
town.
that,
Yeah.
yeah.
We have churches everywhere, and I was the
Right.
third longest. The only other person more than me was my boss and then the Young Life guy
Right.
involved in ministry, who'd been the Young Life guy since I was in high school.
Right.
And so, so anyway, we get to this point, and then there's this. I think the day it all came to a head, and this is probably one of my most embarrassing days of my entire life. Probably I don't want to say the biggest mistake I've made, but it was a pretty big mistake.
It's a great day, and forward note, we laugh about it today.
We do laugh about it. So I have a very, the day starts off pretty normal. We're getting ready we got a mission trip coming up, and I'm getting into the groove of being on the leadership team and being a pastor, and I have a volunteer come in and who's very unhappy with me. And again, not to give a whole lot of detail away, there were a couple things that needed to be worked on, but overall the tone was, truthfully to this day, I believe that it was the culmination of all the tension that had been going on in the church and the leadership switch and me being in that
Right.
leadership now. And they were big fans of the previous guy who was still there. But it devolved. And again, something I'm a little bit ashamed about. It devolved into an argument.
Right.
And you never want to have that. It devolved into enough of an argument that our office manager actually asked my boss if she should go in there and stop it.
Right.
And I got to the point where, and I do believe this was a good maturity learning point for me. What comes afterwards is not so much. But I got to the point where I said, you know what, this discussion is not going well.
Mm-hmm.
And I, in my mind, I'm sitting there going, and the things we're arguing about are really silly.
They were petty.
They were petty, and they're really silly, and we shouldn't be arguing about this. We should be having a reasonable conversation about this.
Right.
And I said, you know what? I need to stop this.
Mm-hmm.
I need to stop this. We need to circle back around when we're both not angry about this.
Yeah.
And not fighting. We can talk about this later. Which apparently was the wrong thing to say, because this individual got really upset and, walked out, basically told everybody I was throwing them out of my office. And, I think it was just all of that built up. I marched right down to the executive pastor and I quit.
Yes, that's right. No calling his wife.
I did call you after I quit.
You didn't tell me you quit, though.
Oh, did I not?
No.
What did I tell you?
You said, I'll be home. Are you home? We need to talk.
Oh, that's right. I thought I told you over the phone. Anyway.
No.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, without the consultation of my beautiful wife and the wisdom with us of a unit with a young newborn daughter, relatively newborn, about a year old, I quit my job.
Yep.
I quit my good job. I quit the job that was paying for my house, my cars, in a
Right.
comfortable place. I said, I'm done. Now, let me lay down some facts here. When I did, to the credit of the executive pastor at the time,
Yeah.
he tried to talk me out of it.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with the staff on that church and anything poor they did. It was a great staff.
He understood what had happened. He wanted me to take a deep breath. But there's a conversation that happened prior to this that I believe was very much a God working through a very good friend and coworker who pulled me aside. The children's ministry director pulled me aside one day and said, you know what? You're never going to be successful here.
Yeah.
And she said, because if you stay, remember, this is the church I grew up in, no one will ever see you as anything more than a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah, and she is still one of my favorite people ever, even though she told my husband it was it was time
now,
to go
ultimately,
somewhere else.
that is not what she meant for me to do. She did not intend for me to go and just storm out.
Right.
And it's, there were obviously because this was the thing. And I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. Not only did I go and quit my job, I still had to deal with this volunteer that night.
Right.
And we were essentially on non-speaking terms, but they're having small groups for high school, and I'm having to interact with these people
Yep.
and interact with her,
Mhm.
and it was incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And there were times where I was like, should I just walk over and apologize? And I think I did at some point. I can't remember. But it was really, really hard because everything felt like there was this giant, like, just like a bulldozer was on me.
Well, so let's back up a little bit. You come home and tell me you've quit your job,
Okay,
right?
so yeah, not the
So
best delivery.
so part of the problem with that is we just didn't have time to process, right? You had to go. It was like, I think it was 1 or 2 in the afternoon. You had to be back up there by 5.
Yes, I did. I had
So
to be back doing my thing.
so we only had 4 hours. Thankfully, I remember Jess was down for a nap,
Yeah.
our daughter. And so we had that time to process at minimum
A very minimum.
what we, because choosing to quit a job is a big discussion. We had never even really discussed it.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this.
And
at all.
so it was a lot of, what do we do now?
Well, and again, while we had that question, this is what was going on was cooler heads prevailed on the leadership side, and I still technically had the job. In fact, up until
Right.
the day I left, they tried to talk me out of it.
They were very I can't say enough about the people that supported us behind
Yeah.
our decision and the staff at that church.
I think they saw through what was happening
Yeah.
and understood that frustration. And so and it took 3 months to find a new job. Like ultimately we did go through with a job change.
And it was quick.
It was
really.
3 months was pretty quick, but after we had kind of settled down and talked through when we were calm after I was calm from the situation and you were willing to forgive me for what I did. We were able, and in the sense, it did make sense to do.
Mm-hmm.
It made sense to take that next step because it's true. There's a certain point where you have to take a chance. You have to step out. And everybody talks about, well, is God leading? I believe God leads us, right?
Right.
But there is a point where you kind of go, you know what? If I'm going to get better,
Yeah.
if I'm going to grow, I may not be able to do that here.
I think there's a cautionary tale on the other end of it that if you are in a bad place where you have no relationship with your leadership over you or seeing over you, it might even be elders depending on how your church is set up. This could have ended in you being terminated that day.
100%.
So the blessing that we had may not be as gifted to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, I could have said I'm leaving, and they would have went, okay, great, see ya.
Get a box, take your stuff on the way out.
Yeah, and so you always want to make sure. And to be honest with you, we're talking about that good relationship with senior pastors and leadership. We're going to get to that down the road in this story. But then you enter into this phase like, okay, I gotta do this. I've said this. Okay, now it's time to step out. You pray about it. You go, okay. This may not have happened the best way, but it is the best choice.
Right.
And so you enter into this job process. And, I'm just going to say right now, looking for a position in a church and ministry is one of the most discouraging things you'll ever find. And I challenge churches to do this. Look at your job positions.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're communicating in your job position is that we have a very, very special looking person.
Right.
And if you don't look this way.
Oh, I'm so tired of that.
Well, and that's the thing is because that's the first thing you lead with. You might have the skills needed and everything, but what you start with is what you need them to look like.
Right.
And to be honest with you right now, I'm fortunate enough to land in a place now where I really, truly believe that this is one of the most encouraging places I've ever been.
Yeah.
A great staff who really deeply care about ministry, but the one thing they're not worried about necessarily is image.
No, not with us not with you or us on staff. They are not.
But unfortunately, that's where we are now. In fact, somebody challenged me one time. He said, go look at the qualifications that they list. He said, you can tell a lot about a church by what comes first on its qualifications for a pastor in a job search.
Which is ironic from my point of view because the qualifications are clearly listed in the Bible.
Well, that's the thing is you will has to show, multiplication of people, blah, 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 dynamic personality. And a lot of times somewhere down there is are the actual biblical qualifications are elder. Now, I think a lot of people are realizing that and they're changing that, or it's
I don't know.
kind of threaded through there. But it's like,
I actually think it's getting worse.
well, a friend of mine who was working on his doctorate at seminary, he said, it's really discouraging to realize that he and I are not in the target demographic for pastoral searches. We are outside the age range now. I'm 46.
Which is ironic because I just read a statistic that only 1 in 7 pastors, I read it this morning, 1 in 7 pastors are under the age of 40.
See, that's and so what's ended up happening is because we're so consumed, and I'm going on a soapbox here because we're telling our story,
Well,
and now I'm on a soapbox.
this is what it's about, right?
We're so driven for this, for next generation ministry, which I 100% believe in, that we think what we have to do is put a person who looks like them up on the stage.
Right.
But that's not necessarily true, which is what we're finding out. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be someone who looks like them. It has to be someone who can demonstrate and show and teach the message clearly where they understand it and go, wait a minute, this is something that I need. And a lot of times what ends up happening is if you are communicating truly what the text and the scripture says, people are going to go, really look at what this is saying. People are going to go, wait a minute, I'm studying the Bible and this challenges everything somebody else told me. And I think that's the key, is they have to be able to see it for themselves and go, wait a minute, now I have to wrestle and rectify everything. And I'm not getting into a theology debate. You go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not getting into that either. I think also what people are drawn to as well, beyond what people are asking for in their, searches, is congregations are looking for love and acceptance.
Yeah.
That's clear by, if you look at any news article talking about the church today, they're CNN, NBC, Fox, everybody talks about how the churches are not accepting.
Yeah, yeah.
And, what that should tell anybody in a pastoral position or working in a church is that people want to be loved.
Yeah, well, they're the community thing. And we all agree that they are looking for community and acceptance and love. The group of young adults that we work with, their primary reason they're coming is because they're in this stage of life where they're looking for that.
Right.
And I think that's what we were looking for. We were that was a big deal for us, is if we're going to go out to a church and work somewhere else, we're going to need a place that we feel like we belong. And, all through this process, we land on this one church that really pursued us, and we felt like things were really, and it was a great opportunity. Everything about it on page was perfect.
Yeah.
And we felt like, we can really connect here. But something you're always going to learn about any job search is you can be so enamored with what it is or what it appears to be that you miss the things you need to see, most importantly, and the things you need to hear in the conversations that have, which is what I learned out of this this next stage of our experience, because this is just the beginning. Like, this is kind of I don't want to say the downhill slope, but this is kind of the bumpy part right before things are going to take a nosedive for us. And,
the funny part is maybe 6 months before this, Nathan had given he had spoken on a sermon on Sunday morning, and he had talked about some of the hardships we had our first year.
Yeah, we talked about how we had a rough first year.
And looking back on that now, it seems humorous at best.
Well, it seems a little bit, it seems short-sighted. We were young, and
we were young.
Anything can change at any time. What I'm thinking is, though, where we jump to now is we get this job laid in our laps.
Well,
right?
not really.
We worked for it. What I mean is,
yeah.
we get this job presented to us. Everything looks right.
Yeah.
Everything looks like it is going to be perfect. And we jump on board with it.
Yeah.
We do all the visits and everything. And, it's the middle of July, and I get a phone call with the job is offered.
Yeah.
And I call you, and this time I called you.
Yeah. At this point, he looped me into the conversations much more readily.
Yes, I did. You were in all the conversations. We talk about it, we pray about it, we say, yes, this is it, and we go for it. And so it's 11 o'clock in the morning. I know the day it happened because it was the day that The Dark Knight came out, the second Christopher Nolan Batman movie.
#, Big Fat Geek
Podcast. Everybody go listen to that podcast. That's the other one I'm on. Among many, actually. So I know that's the day because I'm going to buy tickets to go with the youth group. And so take the job. Everything is, you're on cloud nine when you accept a job. And you're going to meet me because we're going to have dinner together before we go to the movies, celebrate what's happened.
Should we end it here?
And we're going to tell you what's going to happen next.
Okay.
On the
go
next
ahead.
episode. So we're going to end here.
Okay.
And we're going to let you know what happened there because we're on cloud nine. Everything's working.
Yeah. And I just want to give, I'm blanking on her name. Who was it that told you?
Melissa?
Melissa. I just want to give Melissa a shout out that even though we go through 10 years of what hopefully is the hardest period in our lives,
That's true.
That your advice was well taken, and we love you, and we do appreciate your continued friendship through the years and just how much you supported us.
Yeah, I don't think we have to worry about that. I mean,
I know.
ultimately
I
it
think
all
it's
works
worth.
out,
I think
so,
it's
yeah.
worth mentioning before we go into this.
This was never a mistake to do this.
Right.
But today, maybe the lesson learned is not the one we thought it was going to be. So.
Right. We never saw it coming.
All right. Well, if you have any other ideas, questions, or comments, you can send them to us at thepodcastingleads@gmail.com. We're still working on getting that Patreon up, but at some point we'll be able to announce that, and we look forward to talking with you again. Thank you for listening, and get ready for the next part of the story because it's a big one. This is where it almost gets surreal and people can't believe, but
yeah,
we'll let you know on the next episode. So you guys take care. Have a great week. Kim, bye.
Have a great day.
Have a great day. We'll work on that ending a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. You guys have a good one.